hire, and after 5-6 years, it almost became a matter of article of faith amongst HR people. What's interesting to me is, having seen the HR fraternity through some of these phases, 10 years ago, we wouldn't have had this discussion at all. Anyone who questioned rankings would have been considered illiterate, how is that even possible? Obviously, you have to, the keywords were you have to differentiate performance. If you don't differentiate performance, you are somehow just, it became an article of faith and was perhaps not used, very well in many cases. So for instance, what is the science behind a normal distribution itself? And all of us have done basic statistics, so we know that in a large enough population for a random variable, if you set it up in a frequency distribution, you're likely to see a curve of a certain kind, right? That's the fundamental reason why a bell curve is shaped the way it is. Now, if we look at that and we think of within an organizational context, if we're rating a team of 5 or 6 people, does that really hold, for instance? You will immediately, come to the conclusion that obviously it doesn't, because the n is very small, n of 5, whereas you need an n of at least greater than 50 to use, even in any statistical analysis, a normal, curve distribution. So you will question the size of the n, you will question whether the performance of those 5 people is in fact independent as a variable, or is it influenced by the quality of the team leadership itself that they were experiencing. So there are many issues right at the beginning of how you would be, applying this science. So I think the pendulum completely swung to the other side. People within our HR fraternity, and this is, I think, a cautionary tale for all of us, that, it is always good to be a little skeptical with every new HR trend, and, keep a little bit of a questioning mind that, we don't make the mistake of always adopting everything as an article of faith just because, it's the trendy thing of that particular period in time. So I think that became an issue. In a lot of organizations, I think the way it was implemented, if the team size is small, if it's a forced ranking where, irrespective of whether it meets the situation or not, you have to use that, same curve. The shape of the curve itself, there are just so many pieces in this which you could call into question. And when I say call into question, it means these are factors you have to really think about before. So a lot of things happen perhaps rather hastily and perhaps not as well.
So I may like to contradict you a little bit here in the sense that, and it's been going on for 20 years. Nobody thought about it for 20 years, and it can't be hasty for 20 years, right?
So I think, and again, this is only a personal view, I think academics remained skeptical because research outcome is actually very, very mixed, very, very mixed. But HR practitioners haven't been as skeptical as perhaps they should.
Okay, so let's just pass on the baton to Shailesh for a second. So do you think HR guys are, as she is saying, taken in by article of faith? We don't question these things enough. We are not skeptics. We just adopt in a hurried way what maybe the West is adopting or what is happening in the market in general. And I come back to the specific question. So comparison, relativity versus individual performance, and how do we look at that? So there are 2 questions, Shailesh, I'm asking you. One is that, and the second is, do we adopt things very quickly, and should HR guys have a skeptic's mind or a scientist's mind before we now seem to be swinging completely the other way around?
I think, we are partly guilty of this, and it is important that we are learners at all times. I think that frame is so powerful. And if I relate to GE experience, and GE is supposed to have, pioneered this and spent about 18 years with GE in different roles, international and in India in different businesses. Jack Welch, when he took over in 1981, and thereafter, tried to create a certain kind of a culture where he felt that GE needed to really become a lean organization, and therefore had to take out a large number of employees globally, across different businesses. Now that was the need of the hour, and therefore when this bell curve and performance differentiation and forced ranking was introduced and then harped on, reinforced significantly for a long period of time. The intent was to do something which helped the organization and be able to scale that up. You have to see it in that perspective. It was not a small business, it was not a startup, it was a business that had existed, it was a business that had accumulated some bureaucracy, and Jack Welch was very clear in this. He said, I need to shake this organization. Leaders, please work with me. We need to raise the bar on ourselves. We need to be the number 1 or 2 in the businesses we operate in. We need to really outshine, and we need to have very concrete objective measures. And therefore, when he introduced 20, 70, 10 and different other forced rankings in different businesses, he was very clear there was a purpose. The purpose was you have to have a very simple but a clear model that leaders can go back and apply in their businesses. And that model served that purpose then. But then to assume that therefore that will continue to work forever, there was merit in it. I think it needs to be contextualized, and therefore to the point that you're making, the point that you made, I agree. It is important that we as HR folks look at the relevance of any model at any point in time to our situation. For example, if there is a business that's a startup versus another which is evolved for 15, 20 years versus a very mature business that is working across different geographies globally versus a business in one sector, a manufacturing versus a pharma, FMCG, what will work for one will not necessarily work for another. And the same applies for us as individuals as well. So there is a diversity of need and there is a diversity of solutions that we all need to be mature enough to tailor and apply. So to the question that you had, I wouldn't say there is one size fits all that we should apply and continue to apply that forever. It is important to contemporize to the need of today. What works for us is important. Number 1. Number 2, I have also noticed, and I think that was another learning that I picked up from GE in particular, the onus on supervisors to truly understand this whole business of forced ranking and the logic of it and support that with a culture which was very credible and process that were very credible was very important to its effectiveness. If it is pulled out of context and practiced in another organization where supervisors don't own it fully and don't understand, it will be difficult to get the full outcomes that one is targeting. Because it's half done, the process is not credible. The employees want trust, and if it is only aimed to end with a certain rating or certain outcome or to push someone down or up, obviously that process and its credibility will take a hit and a setback. So what's important is to believe in it. What's important that people understand why it is being done, and that shows, if it is practiced over years, people understand, and then you can continue to tailor and upgrade and rebrand and change it. But I think, if we don't do that and we pull it out of context, a model, and apply that to any organization and any sector which may not be appropriate and ready for it, I think we'll then end up making mistakes and will not get the desired outcome. So that is important, that we are open to learning. We look for objectives that we are targeting, see whether this model makes sense. For example, an organization that is focused on very high level of collaboration and teamwork and goes for a forced ranking system where the stakes are very high and there is a skewed and disproportionate focus on bonuses, this is not going to work. You are trying to promote collaboration, you are trying to collaborate to have people work, and you go ahead and force rank people, and at stake is very large bonuses at the end of the year. And if that turns the situation a binary situation, a win and lose for one, it will be difficult to expect people to collaborate in a situation like that. So one has to really think, is that the right model that will work for that system versus another one?
Thank you. So Shrikant, let me just pick the thread up from there, and let me ask you, what in your mind is the purpose of performance management? Because he's saying it's contextual, and from your perspective, having worked in your organization or earlier organizations, as a HR practitioners, what have you used performance management system for?
See, first, let's get things straight. Performance management system is a business system. Unfortunately, it is seen as a HR system.
Okay.
Okay. The moment you clarify that, because HR is the owner of that system in terms of driving the process.
Correct.
No HR head goes and does appraisal or goal setting or media review or feedback sharing or communication of rewards to a sales head or a finance head. It is done by his or her boss. Once we are clear about that, we have to understand it is not a system that we need not talk about whether we should have a PMS or we should not have. We should have a bell curve or we should not have. Those are not the questions. I am of a firm view that these are quintessential things in a business organization, period. Like we have very successfully abused a great institution called religion. And we say that religion is bad, and there are so many people in this world who say that I don't belong to any religion. It is the same philosophy, we don't want a PMS. PMS is not a bad system, but just look at it how we are using it. You know. Now, fundamentals, if we are very clear, performance management and performance appraisal are two different things. But when it comes to the rewards, we focus on appraisal rating more than the overall performance. You know. Second, it is a system and there is an execution of that. It's completely a different thing. So it will be always subjective from organization to organization, manager to manager, and if the system is not tightly designed and governed, whatever you give as a range to play, people will play within that range. So at systemic level, there could be a problem that HR can take care of. But when it is being executed, it is right from the CEO to every line manager, every people manager who is accountable for that. You know, third and most important thing is that performance is different and results are different. You cannot say that performance is equal to results. Result is an outcome of the performance, but performance happens throughout the year. We only measure results at the end of the year. So there are organizations who put competencies into that and say that 50% or 13% or whatever is percentage, we'll give it for competencies, which is actually the behaviors of the people, actions taken by the people, and online performance that is happening. There is some kind of a subjectivity. The biggest criticism that I have heard in my career on performance management system or a demand from the employees and managers is that, can we make it objective? Remove the bias from the system. Now just imagine, if you throw the PMS into a dustbin, you are making the whole organization vulnerable for complete subjectivity, because you don't have anything as an alternative to that. At least I have not heard. I have not heard anybody saying that bell curve can be replaced by something like that. The fact is that there is always a segmentation which is acceptable to us, that you look at a market. So there is in any organization, and that is true for all of us, that if I am saying that India is my geography and I sell my products or services in this geography, my national sales organization will tell me that the segmentation that I do, one region or one state will always contribute much, much higher than any other state or region for that purpose. So if we really apply that same rule, there are always people in the organization who contribute distinctly more than many other people in the organization. And those people are stars, and I am very, very clear, employees do not resist accepting them as stars. The question comes that when I say that you are rated as A, okay, which is the midpoint rating, or meet expectations, you know, these are the terminologies that we use most of the time in our scale. When I am rated as meet expectation or A, what is it that happens to me after the appraisal? What is the consequence of that? If you see, most of the organizations are saying that, okay, so now I will give 9% increment to ME or A rated employee, and to somebody who is rated as the highest will get maybe 13 or 14%. You know, and if somebody stretches it, it can go maybe a couple of points above that. In real terms, absolute terms, the money does not matter. But when I say that you are part of this herd, 70% middle people you are there, you know, and end of the year, I say that when I get that rating of outstanding or overachieving type of rating, the top 2 ratings in the scale, I get an individual development plan, I am put through a assessment development center, I am eligible for early promotions in the organization, there are critical positions identified in the company for which I qualify because I am rated like that, I get much higher incentive more than the increment that I am talking about. All these things happen only because of one rating. If I am A or I am OA. So I shift into a first class compartment, I shift into an air conditioned compartment from a general bogie. Why would I not fight for that? But if you understand, my contribution is significant as an A rated employee or ME rated employee, and there is a development plan for me, there is a career plan for me, there is some kind of a reward beyond my increment is waiting for me, and opportunities are also open for me, because my result of performance as A or ME is not absolute. It is addition of multiple things happening, including the market environment and my boss's bias included in that. But you box me into A and say that you are A, so you will get only increment and nobody is going to focus on it.
So let me shift on that controversial topic and I come to you. It's a very natural system. So let's say, let's take an example.
With your permission,
Yeah.
if I can add to what he just said, because I think he makes a very powerful point, Shrikant. I think, the point about this whole thing not being executed right is so powerful. It is important for us to understand, if we can do a financial review and a budget and continue to review financials every quarter, for example, why would we not do the same for something as important as performance assessment, for example, a conversation, as an example. But we choose, most of us, and large number of organizations and supervisors tend to do this much less frequently and see it as much less important, number one. Number two, where we have experts in different functions to handle this, how trained and how strong is the belief of our supervisors in this whole process?
Yep.
People who execute. Do they understand the nuances of this? And do organizations see it important enough to train and invest? And I have seen organizations that do a super job of this. Very few though. But if it is important, and if the person sitting across the table, the employee, understands that there are well-meaning people who understand this, and there is going to be a positive outcome in terms of feedback to help me develop, I see no reason why people would not accept it. And allow me to, I use poetry once in a while to share my, sentiments. So I'm reminded of these lines where, the poet says, "Sach maniye chehre pe dhul hai, sach maniye chehre pe dhul hai, iljam aine pe lagana fizul hai." Essentially, the execution, if that is faulty, it doesn't mean that, the model itself, can be said to have failed completely.
So let me ask, bring this point up, because I was talking to HR professional, and he was saying to me, and I'll come to you for this particular point, is that he said, Rajan, I have all my subordinates, and if he brings a proposal to me and I send him back saying this is not correct, and he goes back and he modifies it and brings it back, and I still ask him this is still not good enough, and I do that, and I do that 5 times, is he not getting a feedback that his job is not good? Because I've sent him 5 times back to work on the proposal which he was supposed to do. And so interestingly, he himself came up with a solution. He said, now, when I do this, and then in a meeting where I have a structured half-an-hour meeting, I tell him of this instance, then he says, yeah, I understand, I get the feedback now. He says, are we so dumb as human beings that we don't get it, that if you told me 5 times that your job is not good, I still come back and ask you saying that I did a great job. So what do you have to say about this human behavior? So that's why I was going to come to a human behavior perspective rather than a system perspective.
Oh boy. So I think I would actually, my first question would be, is the purpose of that, is it feedback to be evaluative, or is it feedback to get a better proposal or product at the end of it? Because, the two...
It's both, right? He is, in that classic sense, he's developing the guy because he's not accepting it. He's saying you raise your bar, right?
You see, the problem with that, and there is one problem which we perhaps very rarely acknowledge, he just may be poor at giving instructions. I don't know. Maybe he's great, but maybe he's not, and we don't know.
But remember, he's the supervisor, so he'll always have the upper hand, right?
That's the power situation, right? That's a different piece to it. But you will always come across, in fact, I'm sure you would have also come across some of the worst bosses are the ones who are always complaining about their team being completely useless. So there is that phenomenon as well in organizations that, there are people who are just not very good at as leaders. They may be brilliant in other ways, and they're the ones who are always complaining about how nobody in their team is good enough and how everyone. So I don't know what is
let me throw a googly at you on that one, okay? We all, everybody watches or follows some kind of sport here. How many people like tennis? Very few. Okay, so there are few. And in tennis, let's say if you are winning the Wimbledon, it's a fair system. You go and win the Wimbledon, you match against match against match, right? And the first guy gets whatever, $1 million prize. And the second guy only gets $120,000 prize. It's acceptable to everybody. So the same story does not become acceptable in an organization. Why does that happen?
Yeah, actually that there's a good answer to. So if you look at the academics behind compensation, that's called the tournament system of reward, where, and it's same as in some industries like movie stars, one movie, there might be 1,000 talented actors, one will become Shah Rukh Khan and there'll be many who will be, barely making a living. So in some industries, that is the way compensation or rewards happens. There's one winner takes all, and everybody else fights.
But look
in
at us.
organizations.
No, but look at us. All of us accept it, except for the guys who are in it.
You see, because that's an individual sport. Now, in organizations,
pardon me, he said that if you are a great guy, you should, or whatever, OA, etc., all goodies come to you.
So let me answer that. See, the tournament system works when you want a winner takes all kind of, that's the nature of industry. Sports has it, particularly individual sports. Movies have it. There are just these fields. However, in an organization, hopefully, your intention is not just the winner take all. Your intention is that the combined performance of that team of people is higher year on year. So you are aiming, hopefully, to pull the entire team in a certain direction.
So what I hear you saying is, for 30 years, we all got it wrong.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying we should question.
So I said I will throw googlies at her, right?
No, the issue,
okay.
is,
Okay, let's throw googly here. So we all got it wrong, right? For 30 years, we've been, barking up the wrong tree.
Look at your own example, what you are saying about tennis. Tennis has standard definitions of how to assess who wins, who loses, and it is transparently watched by everybody.
So you said two things. You said transparent, okay, that's important.
Well set
and
rules
standard,
and regulations,
set rules.
which cannot be played around.
Yeah, so
Now,
that's the
what
same in
happens,
organizations,
now
right?
you look at a best film award or best TV show award. Why don't we agree with that? We clap and we see that, and then we talk about, no, I think that actor was the best who should have got it, that actress was the best actress, and there is some bias here.
Yes.
But with a tennis player, we don't do that, because how that best film is being chosen, we don't know.
So transparency is an issue, you say?
Most important, because the ratings, we used to call it in one of my companies, how people are rated. There are fears, there are dears, there are tears, and there are cheers.
Okay, that's interesting. I never heard of that. And you get claps for that. So you can clap loudly if you like it.
Okay. No, because what happens is that the guy will leave. Okay, so let us protect him. Where is the performance in that? So as a manager, I have a scope to play, so I would give him a better rating. Now in bell curve, I have had very recently an experience where managers say that last year आपको मैंने OA दिया था, इस बार इसको देता हूँ, आप A में रहना इस time.
So he's balancing, right? He's being a fair human being.
They are being transparent. That is the problem.
That's the problem. You said transparency is good. Now you're saying transparency is a
not
problem.
on this scale. What I'm saying, be transparent on the system.
Okay.
Can I justify to my people? Do I have the courage as a leader of my department to sit with an employee and have a hard discussion telling him or her that your performance has not been up to the mark? Whole year I will keep cajoling people.
So I would say it's still a HR problem, because we did not train people to give hard feedback. We can train people, right?
We should take responsibility for that, because training on performance management to the leaders is a part of the performance management system. And if it has not been done, it is HR's failure, I would say.
So we can fix
I
it,
accept
okay?
it, yes.
Okay.
But point is that whether the manager is willing to do that or not, should HR be doing the policing throughout the year? That is the fundamental question. Now, if you look at it from a point, why should a manager and employee have an appraisal discussion at the end of the year? Why can't it happen every fortnight? A supervisor you are talking about, what job supervisor does? He doesn't do by himself anything. He does not touch the product himself. He makes people do that, whether it is on a manufacturing line or whether it is in the sales situation. He supervises the people and the system there.
Correct.
Now, if he has to review the person, if he reviews daily, आज कितना sale हुआ, आज कितना production हुआ, how can he not give a feedback to that person that you have not done this, you have done that? Instant feedback is the best feedback.
Correct.
If it happens every day, there is no question of telling somebody that you are at A or OA or NA. The person knows by himself. But the problem comes that you connect it and you say that your individual score is very good, boss, but when I compare you with other people, you are falling short of it.
So what's wrong with comparison? Let me stop you here. What's wrong with comparison, Shailesh? It's an organization, you have limited resources, and at the end of the day, you have to give out those resources. And the only way to give out resources when you have constraint is to compare or rank order. So what's wrong with it?
Two things. You know, the end outcome of any classical feedback process is it is complete when the audience accepts it.
Okay.
Otherwise, I may be telling, but the cycle remains incomplete if it is not accepted by the person that I'm giving feedback.
Fair enough.
One. So, you know, it's important that we see it, you know, from that lens. Second, we do it in families also, isn't it? We do to our children, you know, to our relatives. What's different there is a high level of credibility, high level of trust that exists there. Now, move this to an organizational context.
Okay.
If there is a well-meaning supervisor and an ecosystem which is trusted by the employee, we will not have issues even if those comparisons are made. And what's important is they don't have to be made or not made. That is not the point. Is it helpful to the employee? Any performance appraisal process ultimately must serve 2 or 3 key outcomes. One, it must create value for the business and for the employee, both.
Okay.
Okay. It is therefore important that employee must see that as helping. And therefore, springing surprises at the end of the year is not the best way of doing it, to the point that Shrikant was making. It is important that there is a dialogue and there is a credibility and trust that is demonstrated through the year. That has to be created over a period of time for that to be leveraged fully and full impact to be realized. If that is not done and then we jump to achieve the outcome, you know, that process can hurt because the feedback will then not be accepted. So it's important to work patiently, create a culture, create trust where this is done, and supervisors must believe in this. There are many examples that I see today where supervisors are tending to abdicate this whole process to a process and not themselves.
Okay.
There always has to be a balance between the head and the heart. And I see them completely abdicating that to a process. It could be either HR function or a particular, you know, digitized process. I don't think that's the best way of doing it. I think there has to be a regular dialogue and a trust that has to be created. There has to be a commitment to positive outcomes, to developing the individual. I think things fall back in place if there is that kind of trust generated and if this is executed well.
And you know, sorry to
Yeah, go ahead.
if it is a business system, now you look at the objective setting or KRA setting as we call it, you know, in the organization. What is it? The process says these are the business results I am supposed to achieve during the year. It's very clear about it. So there is a key performance indicator by whatever names we call it, and we always insist it should be quantifiable, measurable, it is absolute and not something that can be subjectively criticized by somebody. Just look at it from a point, what is written in that objective statement? It flows from the business plan and strategy, it flows from the CEO or the top of that organization, it may be my head of the department. His KRAs and my KRAs are aligned with each other. This HR tries to all the time achieve. Now, once it is given, why can't we focus on setting right KRAs and working on that? Most of the organization take 3 months, 6 months after the financial year has started, appraisal year has started to complete the KRA setting process itself. That itself is an indicator of what Shailesh was saying. We are not sincere about the system. But if I am a CEO of the company, I must say that on first day of the new financial year, everybody must have their KRAs in place with the objectives there.
So Shalini, why don't we do it as a company? If it is such an important thing, what stops HR or management from getting the KRA sheet of everybody in the first week of the financial year itself? Let's say, you know, in your company, which is Jan to December cycle, why would a person not have on 7th of Jan his or her KRA sheet?
So I think this probably varies from one organization to the other. I'm fairly sure there must be organizations where this happens within, you know, the first couple of weeks. It depends on the scale, size, the way the systems are organized, etc. Very often it's a matter of, particularly when objectives are flowing from the top and, you know, cascading KPIs, etc., that people are waiting for the previous year to get firmed up and the next year's numbers to get to a point where you can begin cascading. So very often the answer is just that it is taking that much time for the organizational goals for that year to be firmed up, and then the cascading process
that's an issue of management, not people, not HR.
Yeah.
Because if the goals are not set,
yeah, it's not an
a
HR.
management
Your business
it's
plan is not
an
ready.
HR issue. at
HR
all.
issue, right?
It's not an HR issue at all.
Okay.
So, if you don't mind, there's one thing I want to, in all our discussion around what are some of the changes which we are seeing, what are people talking about in this whole 2015 has been quite a year, and I guess the second half of 2014 in people re-examining the performance management system, and it's something which has happened after a significant period of time. And if we look at what is the common trends, and of course every organization have its own nuances, but we see one is people are in favor of informal frequent feedback, right? People are in favor of moving away from very strictly defined forced rankings. And people are in favor of the process becoming less administrative heavy and more, more to do with the actual objective, which is to help someone do better in the job that they do. Now, each of these actually had room in well-executed performance management systems of the past as well. It's some of the challenges that we faced are because these pieces of regular, informal feedback, frequent, conversations got lost in the bureaucracy of managing the process itself. So it's very early days to see, for the organizations which are now experimenting with, new forms of PMS. And I think as an HR fraternity, we're all watching to see, what are the lessons that can be learned through this process. So it's very early days yet, but some of these were always cornerstones to what ought to have been part of, a good performance management system, whether designed in the traditional way or in the new way.
Okay. So, Shailesh, you would have seen bell curves in a G environment, and you see bell curves in some other environments. What's your personal take on bell curves? Do they work? Do they not work? Should we have them? Should we not have them?
I've seen them work. I've also seen them not work. And as I said earlier, my take on that is it depends on the maturity of the organization, the environment, the stage of evolution, the ecosystem, the supervisory maturity and commitment. There are several factors, and if the execution, so I've seen it beautifully executed in GE, for example, at some point in time, beautifully serving this purpose. The whole performance appraisal system was extremely simple first, so that it is scalable, because it employs 3 lakh plus employees over 140 countries. So seeing that it had to be simple. Now, over a period of time, when I look at other organizations, I see bell curves, and I see performance appraisal systems which are based on competencies, and I find them fairly complex. And we miss out the fact that for anything to be effectively implemented, for the supervisor to first understand the algorithm, what X or Y competency means, and differentiation on scale means the supervisor needs to understand, HR needs to understand, we need to train people, and then take that to execution, so that this whole process is seen as credible. Unfortunately, I think there is work to be done, a lot of work to be done. The fundamental question is, do we see it as important as organizations, as leaders? I think that's a question staring us in the face. All leaders, organizations must ask that question before questioning the process per se. Have we actually done what is needed? We discuss financials, and do reviews every week. Almost every day we look at numbers and product and sales. Yeah. Do we do that for the people goals? Are we sincere about really implementing before we begin to question and drum it as a failure or a success? Either way, I'm not taking a position on that, but I'm saying whatever is there, and I've seen it work in, again, depending on the context and the organization, the maturity and all of that. It can work beautifully if it is credible and if it is executed well. Trust is key. Otherwise, we can continue to tell, if there isn't trust, employees will continue to see this as a way of fixing sometimes, and getting to an end outcome which is already discussed and agreed in our own mind before before the ground situation is really.
So some of the key words I see all of us talking about: credibility, we talk about trust, we talk about transparent system, we talk about a set of rules which is known to everybody. You're talking about simplicity a lot. And to my mind, these are essential ingredients of a good system which can evolve from where we are today, right? One of the questions I would like to ask you, Shrikant, here is a very different question. It's not about being the HR leader, it's just being a manager. So how many people team do you have, direct reports?
In my current role, about 6.
6. So how often do you sit with them and give them feedback? So to say, as the point he was making, we track numbers every day, and intellectually, as HR guys, we know we should do that. So if you were to begin from our own cells, how difficult or easy it is?
It is very, very easy, I can tell you.
Okay.
The one word you should also write in that is sincerity to the system.
All right, I'll write that.
Because if I am driving and I have conducted hundreds of performance management workshops for my managers, okay, at the drop of the hat I go and conduct that. It has become sort of hobby for me, but I love to do that. Problem is that leaders are not sincere to the system. In one of the recent experiences, I was sitting with my CEO completing his KRAs at the beginning of the year. We had recently launched a technology tool there to do the PMS on that tool. Now, naturally, every manager started resisting, saying that it is waste of time, every time you keep changing the forms, this, that, blah, blah, blah. But finally, we had our own way and we launched it. The CEO did not want to submit it through the system. So as usual, we took a printout and went to the chairman of the company, and we sat with him. So 3 of us are sitting, he went through that, and finally he said, this is fine. And he was about to sign on the paper. So I said, Mr. Chairman, can we go through the technology system? Because we have bought this platform, you have approved so many crores for buying this technology. Can we use that? He said, oh, I'm so sorry. He had an iPad on his table, he opened it, and he started doing it. There was an issue there, and he said, I can't approve it here. So I went to his side, looked at it, and yes, he was not able to do that. I didn't know the solution. I said, give me 5 minutes. I stepped out, asked the guy who handles that system. He said, he has downloaded that tool on his iPad. Actually, he has to go on cloud and do that. I went back to him and did that. He completed the process. This took 25 minutes just for him to say approve. Now, if he was not sincere to it, he would have said, to hell with you, I'm signing it here, you get my secretary to approve it in the system. Simplest solution. Why would a chairman whose time is so valuable do that, unless he is sincere about it? Now, in rest of my workshops, I went and told this story like a political leader to everybody. You know what happened? When I went to the chairman, this is what happened. Naturally, everybody in the leadership team had to follow that system there, Even if they were not sincere, they knew that if chairman is so sincere, it means that he will ask us that question, whether you are doing, or this guy may go and complain against us there. So the issue is that when you are sincere to feedback system, when you are sincere to bell curve system, when you are sincere to the rating system and reward system, things will happen because the system itself has no flaws. But execution there, people are not understanding. Like simple example I'll tell you, bell curve. Now whose baby is it? It is management's baby, it is not employees. Why should you go and tell people that we have a bell curve system और मुझे आपको यहाँ बिठाना है और उसको वहाँ बिठाना है? You don't have to do that. That is only to be known by the people managers, not by the employees. How does it matter? Because he doesn't participate in that system. He has no say there. He cannot resist, he cannot celebrate it. Once he has been fixed, he has been fixed. So why should we go and tell it to people? But every leader will go and talk to the employees and try to say that. We do this calibration nonsense in the PMS, Who does calibration? The topmost authority, the topmost HR guy, they sit in a closed room and they do all sorts of things with the ratings that have been given. How do you care, that guy sitting 100 miles away from here in a factory as a department head of one department, what was his performance? How do you know sitting here in boardroom? So the rating system must end at the first 2 levels of the bottom. The first level manager, the reviewer, that's it. And if they follow the bell curve system, upper level people don't have to do the moderation. And I have experienced it in one of my past companies where we decided that the CEO will not interfere in that, HR head will not interfere, director will not interfere. And end of the year, when we completed the process and reached the increment,